Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about principal parts of verbs and conjugations. So again, to compare this to nouns, when you look a noun up in the dictionary, you will find that it has a nominative. They give the nominative, they give the genitive, and then they give the gender. So, and with those three pieces of information, you can do anything with a noun you want. So you have that information, you can find the nominative, you can find the stem, you know what declension it is, and then you know what gender it is, which depends especially on if it's neuter versus masculine or feminine. So those are kind of the building blocks of a noun. With verbs, they will have four principal parts. So typically when you look a verb up or a verb is given to you, it will have four forms. And again, with those four forms, as long as you know the corresponding endings, you can do anything you want with the verb. You can form any tense, any form, any mood, any voice, anything. Just those are the foundation, the principal parts of the foundation you need. So just to describe to you what the principal parts are, the first principal part with regular verbs will always end in an O. So, and it's just the present tense I verb. So you've seen O verbs before, that's fine. The second one will end in an RE, and that's the infinitive, and it's going to be the to verb. So that's the infinitive form. The third principal part will always end in an I, and that's translated I verbed. So that's what's called the perfect tense. That's one of the two past tenses we're going to talk about. And then the fourth principal part, depending on the textbook you use and your teacher's preference, will end either in a US or a UM. And this is a participle, which again, I'm sure you're not expected to know coming into Latin too, but just if you're dying to know how to translate it, it's translated having been verbed. Okay? So those are the four principal parts, and I'm going to give you some examples in a second. In order to find the conjugation of a verb, you're going to do exactly what you did with nouns, which is you are going to look at the first, that was not intended to happen. You are going to look at the first two forms, and from those first two forms, you can figure out the conjugation, and you can figure out one of the stems, and you can build the present tense. So I'm going to give you some examples of verbs, and then we're going to talk about the conjugation. So whereas with nouns, there are 5 declensions, but I just talked about 3. With verbs, there are 4 conjugations. So, and funnily enough, they're called first, second, third, and fourth. And you will definitely mess up conjugation and declension when you talk about things. I do it. So I had a student who called them conjuglentions, which just to get that out of the way. But again, declension and conjugation pretty much mean the same thing. It's a family of words that behave the same way. Verbs, they just call them a conjugation. Nouns, they call them a declension. There's a reason for it. You don't need to know it. So a first conjugation verb will, the first form will end in an O, and that does have a long mark on it if your teacher takes that seriously. And then the second form will end in A-R-E. So a verb that first-year Latin students often see is amo, amare. And that means I love, to love. And the reason it's first conjugation is because it's got this A-R-E. Second conjugation verbs end in EO and ERE. And that E has a long mark. And that's an important long mark because we're going to see another ERE without one. So EO, ERE. So an example of a Latin verb that you might have seen is habeo, habere, to have. I have, to have. Third conjugation ends in an O and a short ERE. So no long mark on that one. And that's going to be important because this is a wimpy, weak E, and this is a strong, powerful E. So an example of a verb is duco, ducere. That's third conjugation. The O is always going to be long, but the infinitive does not have a long mark. And then the fourth conjugation is IO, IRE. That I has a long mark, and an example of it is audio, audire. So those are the four conjugations. Notice that for first, second, and fourth, you don't really need to look at the first form. It's for the third. If your teacher does not give you a macron, to differentiate between the second and the third, you might need to look at the first principal part. If your teacher gives you a macron, you'll know that this one with the macron is ERE, is second, and this one without a macron is ERE third. So it all depends on whether your teacher gives you the long marks or not. So we now know that there are four principal parts. You need two of them to determine the conjugation, and now you know how to find the conjugation of a verb. And now we're going to move on to stems and tenses.